Donald Trump, speaking of the environment, clamped down on the EPA today, ordering the agency not to award any new contracts and imposing a media blackout on employees. For the time being, that means the EPA has been told to halt all press releases, blog posts, and other forms of public communication. Is it a good idea? To answer that, we're joined by our old friend, the wisest man in politics and the ways of Washington, Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, is this a good idea?
I think it's from the point of view of the Trump administration, I think it's a wonderful idea. Here's a man taking charge of the government, huge slices of which will not be content with his policies, a government heavily populated by people, as we know from the voting patterns in Washington, D.C. and its environs, heavily populated with people who did not vote for him and presumably will resist his policies. And he doesn't have his people in charge of these agencies, and he's trying to keep them from publishing and putting out information that may not comport with his policies. And yes, you can hardly blame him for doing that. And until when he gets his people in place, we'll see what happens. But I don't blame him for imposing this freeze.
So this is being greeted, as you might imagine, here in Washington as the equivalent of the 1953 McCarthy blacklist. So here's at the top of the Washington Post website tonight. Here's the story. This is part of the first paragraph. This raises concerns, quote, that federal employees will be able to convey only information that supports the new president's agenda. Now, you've been in Washington much longer than I have been, but it seems to me they work in agencies controlled by the president. They're supposed to reflect his agenda. Isn't that the point?
Well, it is. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I suppose what the Post is raising is the specter of, reports that are being created and studies being done that are, down the middle. And because the facts contained therein might tend to contradict Trump policy or undermine it in some way, that those things will all be silenced. I don't know that that's the case at all. This looks to me like a temporary measure that is designed to give his people a chance to get in there and see what's going on and decide what communication strategy would work best. I noticed also that someone from, I guess it was the Sierra Club or one of those other environmental groups, was talking about how this is going to cost lives, which seems to me to be more of the same kind of hysterical hand-wringing that seems now to go on about everything that Donald Trump ever says and everything that he ever does.
Many will die. But it does raise the question. We're trying to book that guy, by the way, and I hope he's watching. I hope he'll come on. But it does raise the question. It's a sincere one. So Trump is hated, I'm sure, by the overwhelming majority of federal employees, and there are a lot of them, 2 or 3 million, depending on whether you count the uniformed military. Does he really have a hope of controlling a group of people that large who objects to his agenda?
Well, I think it's worth a try from his point of view. I agree with you, Tucker. I think it's such a this thing is a leviathan, and it's unclear whether anybody can really control it. But I certainly would not, if I were he, want the holdovers from the previous administration and civil service employees that are sympathetic to their agenda continuing to publish communications and so on until my own people were in charge. I mean, the other day, for example, I guess it was yesterday, the national parks out in the Badlands was tweeting, about world climate change. And whether what they were saying about it was true or not, it seems an odd thing for an agency that's supposed to, keep the visitors coming and maintain the condition of the park out there, to be tweeting about, world historical facts about climate change. And I don't blame the administration for saying, wait a minute, let's stop this until we have a chance to get a hold of this agency. Reasonable, it seems to me.
Right. Well, the Pentagon has been doing the very same for the past 8 years, and the State Department and the Interior Department, and every department has been the global warming department for the past 8 years. What department, if you were Trump, would you want to get under control first?
Well, I would certainly want to get Scott Pruitt into the EPA, because the EPA, it seems to me, has been, in the eyes of many and in the eyes of a number of judges who have ruled on cases brought against the agency, to be an agency really, in some ways, out of control. And an agency that many believe has overstepped its bounds, that being the 4 corners of the laws under which they're supposed to operate, to engage in a lot of regulatory activity that people believe were harmful to business, and in some cases against the law. And so I would very, very eager to get him in there. And obviously you want to get your national security people in place. And it looks like Mr. Tillerson's nomination will go forward so they can put him in the State Department. So those top national security agencies you'd want to have there. But if I had to pick one after that, I'd pick EPA.
Yeah, I would too. Brit Hume, not in Washington, but of it, a favorite son of the city. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Tucker.